In a dramatic turn of events, President Donald Trump has suspended a series of tariffs that had sent shockwaves through global financial markets, opting instead for a 90-day negotiation period with various countries. This unexpected pivot, described by some as capitulation day, came after a week of escalating concerns from Republican lawmakers and economic advisors about the potential fallout from his initial tariff regime, which had promised to reshape the global economic landscape. The announcement, made on April 10, 2025, came after days of plummeting stock prices which had wiped out significant wealth from Americans' retirement accounts, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer highlighting a staggering loss of approximately $104,000 in average retirement savings. Trump's decision was spurred by alarming indicators from the bond market, where interest rates on 10-year Treasury bonds were rising, contrary to the expected behavior during stock market downturns. This unusual trend suggested that a deeper economic distress was looming, prompting fears of higher costs for loans, mortgages, and credit card debt for American consumers. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick were instrumental in advising Trump to pause the tariffs. In a social media post, Trump confirmed the suspension, stating, "I have authorized a 90-day pause while maintaining a 125% tariff on imports from China, a strategic move in his ongoing trade war with the country." This dual approach reflects his belief that tariffs can still be leveraged to negotiate better trade terms with allies while continuing to confront perceived unfair trading practices from China. The immediate financial response was stark. Following the announcement, the stock market experienced one of its most significant rallies in history, with the S&P 500 surging by nearly 9.5%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained nearly 3,000 points in a single day, marking a remarkable recovery from the losses that had accumulated in the preceding days. This swift rebound underscored the market's preference for predictability and clear communication from the administration, which had previously been marked by abrupt policy shifts and uncertainty. Despite the euphoric response on Wall Street, the reality of the trade war remains complex. The tariffs on China are expected to escalate, which could further destabilize the markets and lead to retaliatory actions from Beijing. As Trump noted, if the U.S. insists on further escalating its economic and trade restrictions, China has the firm will and abundant means to take necessary countermeasures and fight to the end. These developments pose a significant risk to both the U.S. and global economies, particularly as inflation concerns loom. The mixed reactions from global markets reflect the ongoing uncertainty. While many markets rallied in response to Trump's announcement, they remain wary of the implications of ongoing tariffs and potential retaliatory measures from China and other nations. European leaders, for instance, expressed relief at the tariff suspension but also highlighted the need for clear and predictable trade conditions to facilitate effective supply chains. Looking ahead, the next 90 days will be critical as the U.S. seeks to negotiate new trade agreements while navigating the complex dynamics of existing tariffs. The administration's ability to maintain a consistent and coherent trade strategy will be paramount in allaying market fears and fostering a stable economic environment. The unfolding events serve as a reminder of the delicate balance between aggressive trade policies and their potential impact on domestic and global economies. As Trump continues to advocate for what he perceives as fair trade practices, the financial landscape remains poised for further volatility, with both investors and consumers watching closely. In a dramatic turn of events that sent shockwaves through financial markets, President Donald Trump took to his social media platform Truth Social on April 9, 2025, to announce what he called a great time to buy, just hours before revealing a significant policy shift that would pause tariffs on most nations for 90 days. The announcement not only spurred a massive rally on Wall Street but has also raised eyebrows and sparked accusations of potential market manipulation. Trump's message, which he posted at 9:37 a.m., came as stock markets wavered between gains and losses. His tweet, "This is a great time to buy DJT," was soon followed by a surprising announcement around 1:30 p.m. that he would suspend nearly all tariffs for 3 months while simultaneously increasing tariffs on Chinese imports to a staggering 125%. The market responded enthusiastically. By the end of the trading day, the S&P 500 had surged by 9.5%, recovering about $4 trillion in lost value from previous days. Richard Painter, a former White House ethics lawyer and a vocal critic of Trump, commented on the implications of the president's social media activity, stating, "He's loving this control over markets, but he better be careful." Painter pointed out that trading on insider information is illegal, and the timing of Trump's posts raises questions about whether he had prior knowledge of the tariff pause. The immediate and dramatic market response has led to calls for investigations into potential insider trading, with Democratic senators like Adam Schiff and Chris Murphy openly questioning whether Trump's statements allowed certain individuals to profit at the public's expense. The ambiguity surrounding Trump's message was compounded by the fact that the initials DJT also represent the ticker symbol for Trump Media and Technology Group, the parent company of Truth Social. Following his post, shares of Trump Media soared nearly 22%, further complicating the narrative. Trump's personal stake in the company reportedly gained $415 million in value on that day alone. As the dust settled, some experts cautioned against jumping to conclusions about market manipulation. Kathleen Clark, a government ethics law expert, noted that the incident would likely not trigger any significant investigations, highlighting a shift in the political climate surrounding Trump. "He's sending the message that he can effectively and with impunity manipulate the market," Clark observed. Despite the market's exuberance, critics have pointed out that Trump's frequent reversals in trade policy create a precarious environment for economic stability. The rapid fluctuations have left investors grappling with uncertainty, and many are demanding transparency regarding who may have been privy to information about the tariff pause before it was made public. In the aftermath of the tariff announcement, stock markets globally reflected similar optimism, with major indices in Asia and Europe also experiencing significant gains. However, shares of Trump Media have since pulled back, reflecting a broader market correction as investors reassess the implications of Trump's actions. As the situation unfolds, the long-term consequences of Trump's tariff strategy and his social media proclamations remain to be seen. With investigations potentially on the horizon and the economy still recovering from recent shocks, the question of accountability in market movements and government policy continues to loom large. Investors, lawmakers, and the public alike will be watching closely as events develop, eager to understand the full impact of this tumultuous episode in American economic policy. In an unexpected turn of events, President Donald Trump announced a temporary reprieve on tariffs for over 75 countries, while simultaneously raising import taxes on Chinese goods to a staggering 145%. This decision, made public on April 9, 2025, came as financial markets were reeling from the effects of the prior tariff implementations, which had led to significant declines in stock values and heightened concerns among businesses and consumers alike. The abrupt change in tariff policy seems to be a direct response to mounting pressure from lawmakers, investors, and even corporate leaders like Elon Musk, who were alarmed by the potential economic fallout from the trade war. Following Trump's announcement, the S&P 500 surged by nearly 9.5%, marking one of the largest single-day gains in recent history. However, this temporary suspension is set against a backdrop of ongoing tensions, particularly with China, which has retaliated with its own steep tariffs, raising the stakes in an already fraught economic landscape. While the 90-day pause on tariffs applies to numerous trading partners, it notably excludes China. The new cumulative tariff on Chinese imports, which Trump has characterized as a response to unfair trade practices, escalated from an initial 84% to an unprecedented 145%. This decision has raised fears among American consumers, who may face significantly higher prices for goods, particularly as the tariffs on lower value items have also been increased. In a meeting with key administration officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the White House outlined a strategy to prioritize trade negotiations with countries surrounding China. These discussions aim to forge new agreements and potentially mitigate the economic disruption caused by the tariffs. According to Kevin Hassett, a Trump trade advisor, about 15 of the countries affected have already made offers for trade deals, signaling a willingness to engage with the U.S. in a constructive manner. The European Union, meanwhile, has opted to pause its own retaliatory measures as it seeks to engage in dialogue with the U.S. over these tariff changes. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen welcomed the 90-day pause, expressing hope for productive negotiations. Nonetheless, she cautioned that if talks do not progress satisfactorily, countermeasures would be enacted. In the U.S. House of Representatives, Republicans managed to pass a budget framework aimed at advancing Trump's domestic agenda despite dissent from some conservative factions. This budget, which includes proposals for tax cuts and increased defense spending, was approved by a narrow vote of 216 to 214. The passage of this budget allows Republicans to utilize a special reconciliation process, enabling them to advance legislation with a simple majority in the Senate. As the administration navigates the complexities of international trade relations, the potential implications of Trump's tariff policies are becoming increasingly evident. Analysts warn that the trade war could lead to a fragmentation of global commerce, with countries re-evaluating their economic partnerships in response to U.S. actions. The World Trade Organization has cautioned that ongoing tensions could severely damage the global economic outlook. Looking ahead, the financial ramifications of these tariff policies remain uncertain. While the temporary suspension may offer a reprieve for markets in the short term, the looming presence of heightened tariffs on China and ongoing trade negotiations will continue to shape the economic landscape. As businesses and consumers brace for the potential impact of these policies, the coming weeks will undoubtedly be critical in determining the trajectory of U.S. trade relations and economic stability. In a dramatic turn of events, President Donald Trump has reversed his stance on a series of controversial tariffs that he had previously championed as a bold move to reshape the global economic landscape. Initially hailed as Liberation Day during a grand announcement on April 2, the tariffs soon triggered a financial tempest that rattled markets and raised fears of a recession. Just days later, as the economy teetered on the brink, Trump opted for a 90-day pause on most tariffs, a decision that has left many questioning the consistency and clarity of his administration's economic strategy. Following the unveiling of his tariff regime, which included steep charges on various imports from several countries, the stock market plummeted, erasing trillions of dollars in equity and prompting widespread concern among investors. The Dow Jones Industrial Average experienced its largest one-day loss since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to significant anxiety for Americans relying on their investments for retirement and savings. According to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the average retirement account lost a staggering $104,000 in value as a result of the market turmoil spurred by Trump's aggressive tariff announcements. In the days leading up to his sudden policy shift, Trump remained defiant, insisting that the financial fallout was merely a short-term issue. On social media, he encouraged Americans to view the downturn as a buying opportunity, claiming, "This is a great time to buy." However, behind closed doors, his advisors expressed alarm about the rising yields in government bonds, which typically reflect investor fears stemming from economic instability. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick were reportedly instrumental in advising Trump to reconsider his approach, fearing that continued tariff implementation could lead to a full-blown financial crisis. Trump's abrupt policy reversal came on April 9 when he announced the pause on tariffs while maintaining an increased rate of 125% on imports from China, a move that reflects ongoing tensions between the two economic superpowers. In a post on Truth Social, Trump explained that he had observed a growing anxiety among market participants, stating they were getting a little bit afraid. He characterized the decision to pause tariffs as instinctive, a reflection of his long-held belief in the necessity of negotiation rather than confrontation. Despite the administration's attempts to frame the reversal as part of a larger strategic plan, many observers noted the lack of coherence in Trump's messaging. While Bessent and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt sought to portray the decision as a calculated move to isolate China, Trump's own comments suggested a more reactive approach influenced by market conditions. This internal disarray has raised eyebrows among both supporters and critics, prompting discussions about the administration's credibility and the sustainability of its economic policies. The turmoil also exposed fractures within Trump's advisory team, with trade advisor Peter Navarro advocating for a hardline stance while others pushed for a more diplomatic approach. Notably, tensions flared between Navarro and high-profile figures like Elon Musk, who questioned the wisdom of the tariffs that threatened to inflate costs for American consumers and manufacturers alike. As Republican lawmakers voiced their concerns, some began advocating for legislative measures to restrict the president's tariff powers, further complicating the administration's efforts to maintain party unity. As the dust settles from this turbulent week, the implications of Trump's decisions remain uncertain. While the stock market rallied following the announcement of the tariff pause, the longer-term effects on American businesses, consumers, and international relations are still unfolding. Economists warn that the volatility introduced by such policy fluctuations could undermine investor confidence and disrupt established supply chains, raising questions about the viability of Trump's trade strategy. Looking ahead, the next 90 days will be crucial for the administration as it navigates negotiations with various countries impacted by the tariffs. How effectively Trump and his team can articulate a coherent and beneficial trade policy will ultimately determine the economic trajectory of the United States and the stability of global markets. As investors and political analysts watch closely, the need for clarity and consistency in the administration's economic strategy has never been more pressing. In a significant shift in defense policy, President Donald Trump has tasked the Pentagon with preparing for the potential cancellation of several major defense acquisition programs. This directive, issued through an executive order on April 9, 2025, aims to revitalize the U.S. military's procurement processes by prioritizing speed, flexibility, and innovation in defense acquisitions. Unfortunately, after years of misplaced priorities and poor management, our defense acquisition system does not provide the speed and flexibility our armed forces need to have decisive advantages in the future, Trump stated in his order, emphasizing the need for a comprehensive overhaul to maintain America's military edge. The executive order, titled Modernizing Defense Acquisition and Spurring Innovation in the Defense Industrial Base, mandates a thorough review of all major defense acquisition programs (MDAPs) within a tight 90-day timeframe. Programs that are over 15% behind schedule, exceed their budgets by the same margin, fail to meet key performance parameters, or do not align with the Secretary of Defense's mission priorities will be considered for cancellation. This could have profound implications for defense contractors and the workforce, signaling a pivot towards more commercially viable and efficient solutions. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is charged with not only identifying which programs might be scrapped but also developing a broader strategy to reform the Pentagon's acquisition processes. This includes a preference for commercial solutions and streamlined contracting mechanisms that could facilitate faster and more effective procurement. Hegseth is expected to submit a reform plan within 60 days, which would reshape how the Department of Defense approaches acquisitions. The executive order further stipulates that the Pentagon's acquisition workforce will undergo a review aimed at restructuring performance metrics and training requirements to foster a culture of innovation and risk-taking. This initiative underscores the administration's intent to modernize the defense industrial base, making it more adaptive to the rapidly changing landscape of military technology. In a related development, Trump hinted at a staggering $1 trillion defense budget for fiscal year 2026 during a recent press event alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Defense Secretary Hegseth later confirmed the figure, although details remain sparse regarding what this budget would encompass. Analysts suggest that this ambitious figure could indicate a significant increase in military spending, with various interpretations depending on how the budget is defined, whether it includes only the Pentagon's base budget or encompasses broader national security expenditures. The implications of such a budget are vast, potentially allowing for extensive enhancements in military capabilities and procurement strategies. However, until a formal budget request is submitted, the exact impact remains uncertain. The administration is expected to release a preliminary budget outline soon, providing a clearer picture of its defense priorities and spending strategies. As the landscape of U.S. defense spending evolves, the challenges within the budgetary process are becoming increasingly apparent. Congress has struggled to finalize defense appropriations, leading to a reliance on continuing resolutions that limit military planning and spending flexibility. The anticipated budget debate will not only focus on military investments but also the need to balance these with critical domestic funding requirements. The upcoming months will be crucial as the Pentagon navigates these directives, potentially reshaping the future of U.S. defense acquisitions and military capabilities. Observers will be keenly watching how these changes unfold and what they mean for the defense industrial base as well as for the broader strategic posture of the United States in a complex global environment. In an escalating tit-for-tat amid the U.S.-China trade war, China has announced plans to significantly cut the number of American films screened in its theaters. This decision comes in direct response to President Donald Trump's recent imposition of hefty tariffs on Chinese imports, which have now reached an unprecedented 125%. The China Film Administration stated that such excessive tariffs are likely to diminish Chinese audiences' favorable perceptions of American films, signaling a growing cultural and economic rift between the two superpowers. The China Film Administration expressed its intention to adhere to market principles while also respecting audience choices. "We will moderately reduce the import volume of American films," the agency declared. This move is poised to impact Hollywood studios, which have increasingly relied on the lucrative Chinese market for box office revenues. As a direct consequence of these tariffs, which have raised the effective rate on certain imports to about 136%, Hollywood may face a financial downturn as Chinese audiences turn to domestic films or other foreign offerings. The backdrop of this cultural clash is a broader economic context. Trump's recent tariffs announced on April 2 have led to widespread consumer unease. Economists warn that the rising costs of imported goods could exacerbate inflation and potentially lead to a recession. According to a Bureau of Economic Analysis report, the U.S. is the largest importer globally, with imports from China accounting for a significant portion of everyday consumer goods. In February alone, the U.S. imported over $328 billion worth of goods, including electronics, automobiles, and apparel. As consumers react to the looming price increases, many have begun stockpiling essential items. Food prices, for instance, have surged by 23.6% since 2020, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Although many staples are domestically produced, the reliance on imports for certain products, such as fruits and vegetables, remains significant. Michael Swanson, Wells Fargo's chief agricultural economist, reassured consumers that U.S. farms are well equipped to meet domestic demand despite potential tariff repercussions. In the electronics sector, which heavily relies on imports from China, the looming tariffs could lead to price hikes on items like smartphones and laptops. Felix Tintelnot, an associate professor of economics at Duke University, warned that a 125% tariff could render products nearly prohibitive to import from China, compelling companies to explore alternative production sites. The apparel industry is similarly vulnerable, with over half of U.S. clothing imports coming from China. The American Apparel and Footwear Association has cautioned that consumers may soon feel the pinch as retailers pass on these costs. However, some fashion advocates see an opportunity for the growth of sustainable and second-hand shopping practices as consumers reconsider their purchasing habits amid rising prices. As the trade war intensifies, the ramifications of these tariffs extend beyond immediate economic impacts to include cultural exchanges and diplomatic relations. The move to limit U.S. films in China may be seen as a retaliatory strike against what Beijing perceives as American economic bullying. This cultural shift could further entrench negative perceptions on both sides, complicating future negotiations and cooperation. Looking ahead, the unfolding scenario suggests that both countries will need to navigate a complex web of economic and diplomatic challenges. If the U.S. continues to pursue aggressive tariff strategies, the potential for further retaliatory measures from China remains high. As consumers and industries brace for the implications of these tariffs, the future landscape of U.S.-China relations will depend on the ability of both nations to find common ground amidst escalating tensions. The question looms: will the cultural exchange that once thrived between the two nations suffer irreparable damage, or can a new path towards understanding emerge from the current discord?